Episode number 12. Kay went over to the stairway to get to the room where the hearing was to take place, but then stood still again as besides these steps he could see 3 other stairway entrances, and there also seemed to be a small passageway at the end of the yard leading into a second yard. It irritated him that he had not been given more precise directions to the room. It meant they were either being especially neglectful with him, or especially indifferent, and he decided to make that clear to them very loudly, and very unambiguously. In the end he decided to climb up the stairs, his thoughts playing on something that he remembered the policeman, Willem, saying to him, that the court is attracted by the guilt, from which it followed that the courtroom must be on the stairway that Kay selected by chance. As he went up he disturbed a large group of children playing on the stairs, who looked at him as he stepped through the rows. "Next time I come here," he said to himself, "I must either bring sweets with me to make them like me, or a stick to hit them with." Just before he reached the first landing he even had to wait a little while until a ball had finished its movement. 2 small lads with sly faces like grown-up scoundrels held him by his trouser legs until it had. If he were to shake them off he would have to hurt them, and he was afraid of what noise they would make by shouting. On the first floor, his search began for real. He still felt unable to ask for the investigating committee, and so he invented a joiner called Lanz. That name occurred to him, because the captain, Mrs. Gaubach's nephew, was called Lanz, so that he could ask at every flat whether Lanz the joiner lived there, and thus obtain a chance to look into the rooms. It turned out, though, that was mostly possible without further ado, as almost all the doors were left open, and the children ran in and out. Most of them were small, one-windowed rooms where they also did the cooking. Men, women held babies in one arm, and worked at the stove with the other. Half-grown girls, who seemed to be dressed in just their pinafores, worked hardest running to and fro. In every room, the beds were still in use by people who were ill, or still asleep, or people stretched out on them in their clothes. Kay knocked at the flats, where the doors were closed, and asked whether Lanz the joiner lived there. It was usually a woman who opened the door, heard the inquiry, and turned to somebody in the room, who would raise himself from the bed. "The gentleman's asking if a joiner called Lanz lives here." "A joiner called Lanz?" he would ask from the bed. "That's right," Kay would say, although it was clear that the investigating committee was not to be found there, and so his task was at an end. There were men who thought it must be very important for Kay to find Lanz the joiner, and thought long about it, naming a joiner who was not called Lanz, or giving a name that had some vague similarity with Hans, or they asked neighbors, or accompanied Kay to a door a long way away, where they thought someone of that sort might live in the back part of the building, or where someone would be who could advise Kay better than they could themselves. Kay eventually had to give up asking if he did not want to lead all around from floor to floor in this way. He regretted his initial plan, which had at first seemed so practical to him. As he reached the 5th floor, he decided to give up the search, took his leave of a friendly young worker who wanted to lead him on still further, and went down the stairs. But then the thought of how much time he was wasting made him cross. He went back again, and knocked at the first door on the 5th floor. The first thing he saw in the small room was a large clock on the wall, which already showed 10 o'clock. "Is there a joiner called Lanz who lives here?" he asked. "Pardon?" said a young woman with black, shining eyes, who was, at that moment, washing children's underclothes in a bucket. She pointed her wet hand towards the open door of the adjoining room.